So who will start? Maybe you, Anna?
Yeah, I suggest Zsuzsi.
How the whole thing started?
How you met each other? What is the motive for this?
Well, maybe it's good to just start with this kind of historical narrative, or it's helpful actually, because it's some of us knew each other from before, actually, from different like housing movement related networks, but we weren't in a very close contact. And then in October 2017, there was this, but I think we already spoke about this, the collaborative or experiment days, actually, that's what it was called, in Berlin. And it was co-organized by Urbamond, who have been supporting this ever since. And specifically Bea Badney, who was, she works for Urbamond, which is an NGO, a Swiss French NGO supporting community-based housing initiatives around the world. And since, or I think partially because she has Hungarian origins, she was kind of from the beginning pushing this Eastern European collaboration or the development of community-led housing in Eastern Europe. And so at this event that they organized, there was an event, several of us were invited, and then there were several discussions, I think several workshop sessions that were dedicated to Eastern Europe specifically. And then in the organizing before, we kind of suggested that we focus on the issue of how these initiatives can be financed, because this was a bottleneck that we often encountered. And but this is just a detail. I remember I was at a conference in Athens when we were emailing about this actually, and so in my head it's somehow connected to Athens. But it was with this preparatory emailing for this Berlin workshop, and then we kind of decided that we would focus on the issue of finance, and then Anna and Mark also suggested that we involve Goran, who was the founder of ZEF, and so it kind of started growing a bit already before, and then we met in person, and there it was this very, very lively and very fruitful discussion. And I think all of us were kind of in the mood of, okay, well, we've been to so many workshops where we just discuss about these things theoretically, and we want to kind of skip those steps and talk about what can be done practically. And so I think it was this very inspiring meeting for all of us, and then we decided that we would want to continue somehow. And in the beginning, it wasn't clear that this would become an organization. We first just agreed, okay, let's meet in a few months' time in 2018 January for the next time, and then afterwards it started to formalize. And I don't know, maybe sometime around spring 2018, we came up with the name MOBA, or in the summer or something like that. Yeah, and well, the main motivation that brought MOBA to life, I think, was these very common constraints that we encountered in our initiatives in these different countries, and this recognition that we don't have an institutional environment that would support this, and also we don't have financial means that would, I don't know, make it easy, or that would make it straightforward how to do something like this. And so that was a very important part of how we came together to kind of practically unblock channels to be able to do these kind of projects in our countries. So there is, of course, an aspect of experience exchanging and learning from each other, but this kind of motivation to that together we'll be able to get practical support and financial means that alone we wouldn't be able to. That was very strong from the beginning.
Maybe just to say that it was very important for us that we, from the very beginning, had realized that our conditions in our context are very similar, and that is one of the major things that brought us together. And there was, I remember reading in the car on the way to the conference in Berlin, a text that Zsuzsi and Agi from Budapest wrote about the condition for financing these sort of projects was really like very nicely explaining the difficult situation in which we are, where there is a lack of financial institutions that recognize the potential of this, but also really even recognize legally cooperatives as something to finance, and very different financing situation in the Western Europe and, let's say, Eastern or Central, Southeast Europe, in which no MOBA members now are.
So what does MOBA mean?
MOBA is a word that is used in South Slavic languages, Serbian, Croatian, Bosnian. I'm not sure about Slovenian. But in principle, it means mobilizing for a common cause. So basically it is usually in a village, people come together to help each other to do a harvest. So they move from one family to another to support each other until all the work is done, or to finish a house. So it is a volunteer work in support of the community, basically, and non-remunerated. There is no money in it involved. So that is the origin of the word. And it is today treated as a sort of bit more forgotten or archaic word. But we have done one poll on Facebook, like in spring last year, to check what this generation, people who are in their 30s, 40s, 20s, know what it is. And it is interesting. A lot of people knew what it is, and were exciting also to rediscover this word. So in some way, I think this rediscovery of the term is very exciting for us.
And in the Hungarian version, it was used mostly for building houses for each other, actually. And so, especially during state socialism, that was how people in the countryside would build houses. Like they would go and like the whole community helps build one house and then the next one. And a lot of Hungarian families have their houses built by Kollektíva. So it's a more general idea that this whole housing cooperative movement is very visible in Western Europe, and I think it's very easy to just make it seem like it's an idea we're trying to overtake from Western Europe. And so I think this name is also kind of a claim to, or like this recognition of roots within this geographical region of these kind of practices that we are building on.
Actually, I wonder this myself all the time, the same question. Yeah, but it was, the whole thing, how it started, it was pretty informal. Just like perhaps the word MOBA means quite informal cooperation. And even when we gave ourselves this name, I don't think we already had it in mind very concretely that we want to establish a legal entity, right? It was then, I think, a bit later on when we were thinking more of what types of, I don't know, services or what activities we would like to do, that we realized that we would need a legal entity. Mainly when we started talking more and more seriously about establishing some sort of financial mechanism that could support ours and other cooperatives. It was, I think, a recommendation by one of our colleagues from Croatia, who is who is a bigger expert on these structures as well as on financial products, that suggested that we should try and establish this type of legal entity. And yeah, I think we were the first one in Croatia, and in some of our countries, I think there's a couple of them in Hungary. In Slovenia, for instance, there is also not a single one registered for now. So it was quite an interesting thing, also being kind of groundbreaking in that regard, maybe setting an example for future. Why exactly that type? Let's say because it is. It still works and is based on cooperative principles, which is nice. And maybe the second reason is that because of its nature, wherever you register, it automatically, wherever within EU you register, it automatically gives you permission to operate within other EU countries as well. whereas for typical companies, this is not possible. You know, you have to open up a subsidiary account or company in other country where you want to operate as well. So in pragmatic sense, I think those were the main reasons.
Oops. And how do you see it functioning? I mean, what are you going to do with this? What is this entity going to do?
Hopefully, sooner rather than later, start financing our projects, and soon, I hope, also others. But it is a very long way to go to get there, I think. I mean, at least a lot of work to be put in. And of course, these things are not so easy, you know, when Anna was before explaining the name, she said it is work-based for no remuneration, right? And we are, in majority at least, working on this on voluntary basis, which is presents it's quite difficult to organize serious projects and serious developments in that regard, because, you know, people are not able to dedicate their full times to this, although it is often more than a full-time job or mission. So what we have been doing lately is trying to find financial supports, non-refundable grants, either public EU or private ones, to be able to start support our work and to be able to develop these kind of mechanisms much faster. Although, you know, this process has been of developing the actual mechanisms has been going on nonetheless, despite the lack of funding. But the second reason, we also need funding to start loaning money to our cooperatives. Yeah, we do not. The main thing of this fund will be that we will be able to help cooperatives develop to a certain level where they are able to start construction, so to start absorb the loan, and we will loan them money with which they can build a house, create a community, and gather interest. But hopefully this interest will be much lower than what the market offers for now, and it will be much more flexible than the current options that exist. I don't know, would anybody from the group add anything?
I think it has been an interesting sort of like snowball from this very first meeting in Berlin to where we are now. I mean, what was also interesting or maybe sort of signifying of this moment in Berlin is that we were there while, let's say, in the background, some of the highlights of cooperative and co-housing projects got awarded. And we found ourselves in the situation where we basically have none of these things existing. We are all at the point where we want to reach a sort of a breakthrough in this, realized the very first one. So that was like, you know, it was very important to recognize this, that there is a whole world out there for which this form of housing apparently is normal. It's you know, it's an ongoing practice, but we find ourselves in the position where we have to build up this practice and the whole conditions for it basically from the ground up. This has been a quite quickly unfolding or rolling snowball, which led us to the point where we understood that at that point, if we want to be maybe financial actor ourselves, we will have to have a more formal form. And for that, this cooperative society, European Cooperative Society, as a sort of cooperative of cooperatives, seemed like the most fitting form, you know, the most, in a way, sympathetic or close to how we see our own smaller organizations now grouped into a larger structure.
Perhaps this doesn't directly relate, but what Mark was talking about reminded me a little bit also. You know, we mentioned some pragmatical reasons behind all this, pragmatic logic, but there's also perhaps, let's say, more ideological reasons. At a certain point, like Mark said, this is very capital intense project that we are doing, and to get capital you need to go to the bigger banks to get funds. Basically, you have to go to organizations that are not the main reason, but are part of the one of the reasons that we have a problem as we do in the area of housing and other economic areas. And what you do, you actually, by doing your project, which is supposed to be, you know, socially responsible, etc., you're giving them just a new means to extract value and create a lot of profit for them. So by going the other way and establishing financial mechanism on your own, you're also freeing yourself from that constraint and working subvertly towards them.
But just to add to this financial aspect, because yes, this was from the beginning, like we said, this very important motivation behind MOBA, but I think this is also what makes it complicated, and this kind of what Rock was saying, that it requires a lot of work. It's like complicated and big processes. It's also because, like, if we would just want to do this organization for I don't know, sharing experience among different Eastern European initiatives, then that would work as a simple NGO. We all have experience in that, and it's easy. But since we want to do these bigger financial transactions, that's what makes it more challenging, I think, because there are all these rules about how you can do, like, internal loans, for example. That's something that's regulated quite strictly in some countries, but it's also a gray zone. And if you have a cooperative, then it also becomes more possible, because you only do lending as internal transactions, but actually there isn't really that much practice for this kind of thing in any of our countries, I think, and so this, like, building up this kind of capacity is what's well, it's very exciting in this whole MOBA process, but that's also what makes it a lot more complicated than just doing some kind of international NGO, I think.
Maybe just first to say that MOBA has started in collaboration of local initiatives, housing cooperatives, in making some already existing and some which were made or formed during this process. And a couple of organizations that have been supporting us from the very beginning, and Zsuzsi was mentioning at the start, Urban Monde and World Habitat, which are professional organizations which are dealing with housing on a global level, but also the ZEF Cooperative for Ethical Finance. So these were really our allies from the day one, and really helped us also in a way of positioning ourselves in the larger, let's say, picture of the housing initiatives, movements, prospects also, but also in the context of finance with ZEF and the cooperative finance. So we have also, their knowledge was also helpful in a way of creating this bigger picture, because without, for instance, ZEF on board, I think that we would not dare in a way so quickly to step towards forming this kind of organization, and also understanding what is its potential. What we see as a potential, really, for instance, for the European Cooperative Society, MOBA as European Cooperative Society, is to tap into bigger flows of EU finance, like European Investment Bank and Council of Europe Bank, which are investing into housing, but their, let's say, portfolio, as they're called them, to enter into that, you need agglomerations of many projects. So they don't deal with anything under 10 million euro. And we understand that obviously this is not the first step that we are going to make. So we have to make a number of smaller steps to reach to that point. And our very first step was to approach a Swiss cooperative, the largest Swiss cooperative organization called ABZ from Zurich. It is a large cooperative with 7,000 members and about 5,000 apartments. And they have a solidarity fund, and their fund gave us the initial, let's say, trigger for starting our MOBA Housing Development Fund. This is a small amount. This is like 30,000 Swiss francs for the start. but it gives us a space to experiment and to make a tryout, and with that experience to go on.
Gigi?
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to say not to forget, while legally there is a certain amount, there are certain founding members, but actually I would rather say that everybody that has been working with MOBA for a while is one of the founding members, although they were not written on the piece of paper. This was due to some pragmatical reasons, not to make any distinctions between these organizations. But in essence, this is some of our local cooperatives from Slovenia, Croatia, Hungary, Serbia, Czechia. Let's say these are the main members in a way, because we have two different membership types. These support members, I think we call them investor members, like some international networks like World Habitat, Urbamont, ZEF, I think is also as an investor member.
No, I think we think of it as associate member, actually. No.
These are associate members. All that are not full members are associate members, but we gave them a tag as investor members. I think it had some legal implications, being able to I don't know, I think it was also for tax purposes that we said they're in fact investor members.
It came from Croatian regulation because we are registered in Croatia, so then we had to follow the local lingo, let's say. But internally, we actually, so there are cooperants and investors, and cooperants are full members and investors are associate members. All the associate members can also really be, and that we also expect, also real investors. So it is a double role of the associate members.
But this is the more loose form of membership you could, let's say, understand in that sense, the associate members.
And associate members, if they're cooperatives but not ready to be a full members, they can stay on the level of associate members for a while, and then after a while request to be a full members.
We may, I think, make the process a little bit too complicated, but basically, to sum it up, you just you apply for it, and we do a revision. What type of entity you are? You have to show that you are also working on a non-profit basis, I think, and that your values are in line with the cooperative values. So this is kind of the first step. This, I think, already enables you to become an associate member or an investor member, however we phrase it. But to become full member, you need approval from the cooperative assembly. And when you get, so let's say on this yearly assembly that we have, it can be more often, but let's say at least on a yearly basis, when you are accepted there, you officially become a full member, which means that you get all rights and obligations from this type of membership level, and you also have, within a certain time period, pay the obligatory membership fee, which is 500 euros for one share. Yeah, but you can buy more shares, but it gives you, as with most, not all cooperatives, no matter how many shares you have, just one vote within the cooperative. We are now developing, I think we were thinking to have it develop faster, but we also then have a kind of, let's call it a subscription model. So based on the size and capacity of each individual member, we define a yearly fee, which provides the funds for basic operations of the cooperative, and also to be able to offer some basic support and some basic services to our members. So, for example, if you're a cooperative, you pay, let's say, 50 euros per year plus 5 euro for each member, or for each resident of that cooperative that you have per yearly basis. So it's still rather small amounts in the end, because we are all rather small groups and small projects.
Could you describe, I mean, who can become full member? What kind of groups can become full members of MOBA? What is the target group?
The full member, so it's the one that we are targeting our products and services most at. So these are housing cooperative projects. This is the main target group. This is the entities that can become full members. So projects like our own.
We have defined that there are projects like which are to develop or developed already. Their own housing project, but also we have defined very early on a sort of ecosystem that we are envisioning. And as a part of this ecosystem, we also see umbrella organizations which would be national. So for instance, in Hungary, there is already the second house which is about to be built or bought or renovated. And there is idea to develop an organization, let's say local in Budapest, for instance, or in Belgrade here, which is gathering these different initiatives locally. So these national organizations would also be MOBA members. Maybe what is important to say is that through this process of workshops that we have been doing from January 2018, each 2-3 months, we have defined a whole set of principles and ways of doing and thinking. And one of the important steps was that we defined what are the values, let's say, that we stand for. And among the most important ones is that the projects, as Rok was mentioning, are not just not for profit, but also non-speculative, that you cannot sell these properties and gain money later on, which would then raise the prices of housing. And another one is that projects are working for a bigger cause, so that they're not just self-centered and doing their own small thing and then don't care for the rest, but that they are interested in supporting development cooperative housing further on in their own contexts. So these are some of the main things. And then another thing which we also develop, which is not related to how you become a member, but what MOBA is so what we call, for now we call it MOBA standard. And this MOBA standard comprises of a number of these principles, which makes a group that would join us also fit or not fit this. So if there would be a group which is really interested in this profit making and private ownership specifically as one of the things, it would simply not be a good match for MOBA. Although it is not fixed that the MOBA members have to be cooperatives, they can also have other legal forms, because that was another thing that we discovered along the way, that cooperative principles are very important, but not necessarily cooperative as a legal form fits the best all the contexts. So sometimes it is an association that is maybe better fit in the local circumstances, or another form.
So how could a group from Greece, for example, be part of MOBA? Or is it geographically bounded?
Yeah, I think we've been having discussions about this for, well, it's something that comes up again and again. And I think what we are a little bit strict on is to have this kind of, well, you could call it this peripheral economic position, or this kind of structural position in terms of housing and finance that is similar, because we think that it is more helpful for these kind of groups to come together than groups from countries that have much more established systems or just different possibilities in terms of the resources that they can access. And also because, like, in a political sense, I think it's important for us to claim that the fact that these housing models have not developed in our countries is not because, I don't know, people here are incapable for this kind of organization, but because of these broader structural and economic constraints. But in this sense, I think Greece has a similar position as Eastern European countries. And then the other question would be, well, there's the practical aspect also, which could raise questions. Of course, now with COVID, everything is quite different, but before the way we functioned was very much these kind of quite regular meetings every 2 or 3 months, and we would just, you know, get in a car and drive over. Like, all our cities are very close to each other geographically, so it was very easy to do these kind of exchanges. So that was another aspect that sometimes came up, that if there would be a group that is further away, then how could they be integrated into this kind of functioning easily? Yeah, but I don't think we have a very strict position on that. So I think that if you would be, I don't know, seriously interested, then we would have to discuss and see what everyone's opinion is.
At the moment, the information about MOBA is very sparsely to be found on the website, moba.coop. It's still very rudimentary. This is something which we are planning to, to expand. One of the things which we immediately recognized is that it would be really helpful to have a sort of guide for groups who want to become MOBA members. That's basically aiming at groups who already know what is MOBA about, but want to get into the more detailed understanding of how MOBA works, what MOBA aims at, what are the positions of members, also what are the obligations of members. So this is a guide which we will distribute to groups who are, let's say, already acquainted with MOBA, understand what it is about, and are on the path to become either an associate member or have the wish to become later on also a full member. So in that trajectory, we think to make that guide available. That guide could actually grow in the coming years to a more substantial guide, which also helps group in how to set up their own endeavors, their own cooperatives or community-led housing projects, somehow in, let's say, with compatibility to the MOBA ecosystem. But I think for a sort of general information, which is of course also very important, we will bring parts of what you have been looking at, this guide, also to the web platform, the website of MOBA, to give this wider perspective on this cooperative community-led housing and what MOBA intends to do for it.
And one of the first things, which is not yet implemented on the website, but I hope we will do it soon, is that we will have a questionnaire. So let's say relatively simple checkup for interested groups to see if their ideas are compatible with what MOBA is doing.
And one thing which we started to work on is the whole, let's say, financial construct for such housing developments. Again, it's for a lot of groups, it's quite a tricky and maybe even intimidating area to go into, you know, like, because you have, on the one hand, you have investment, which is it's going to be quite a large investment when we speak about housing, this type of infrastructure. Many groups never dealt with such sort of investments and the type of negotiations which you will have to find capital, to find what's the good legal structure, etc., etc. And then in the end, of course, most of the groups have the ambition to have something which is also affordable as a housing option. You know, like it's not just about realizing a housing project, but a housing project which gives access to a large section of people. So it has to be affordable. It has to be also affordable on the long term. So what we did is that we developed a sort of a life cycle analysis tool, but from the financial side, with which you can understand what it takes to make the investment, but also what it takes to, you know, like to over a longer term to operate such a housing project. At the moment, we have this available also on the website of MOBA, so anyone can basically can use this already. But I think it is something which over the course of the years could become, let's say, a more accessible and easy to use package, which could help also to, in a way, quickly sketch your initial ideas. I think there might be a lot of other things which we could add there. One thing which a lot of groups will have to make are, in the end, business plans, especially you know, like if you want to work with external financiers, they will want to know where you know, where their investments go. But I think actually also towards each group, you know, who invests, if not part of their own savings, it's a lot of time into these projects.
Yeah. I think that's a very important, yeah, and very challenging question. And like, since we have, like in Budapest, we have this first small house with 7 people, and there it is quite affordable. Like it's the rent levels that we are paying is around maybe 60–70% of market rent, or more 60. But this is possible because we actually don't have a bank loan, and we, like, the house was financed half by membership loans. Like we don't call them shares really, because well, legally we're not a cooperative, but that's kind of the idea, that people put money in, and they will, if they leave, they can get that money back with some very, very small interest. And that's half of the money, and the other half is these direct loans that we got from people who wanted to support the whole project. And so this was possible because it's a small project altogether, and it was a house that we renovated, and most of the renovation work was done by ourselves and by another cooperative that we are in partnership with. I mean, they're not a housing cooperative; they're this all kinds of other cooperative, and so the renovation was very cheap because of this, and also the financial costs that we have. I mean, the interest rates are also low, because with direct loans, we also have an average of, I don't know, 4% on these loans, and some are higher, some are lower, and on the member loans, which is half of the capital, it's a very small. It's only a 2% interest. So that's why it can be cheap, actually. And also because we found this house, like, we were very lucky with it. Well, that's something that you can work on, that and that's why we are actually focused on renovating existing buildings and not building new ones, because with existing buildings, if you put enough work into searching and always looking at the real estate market, then you can be lucky sometimes and find these buildings that are quite cheap for some kind of a reason, and then you can renovate it with a lot of own work, and then you can make the whole investment cheaper, which then makes the rental prices cheaper. But then on a larger scale, I think it becomes quite complicated, because now that we're trying to do calculations, or we're trying to think about how to upscale this whole thing, and to make it possible to, I don't know, have buildings that have separate flats in them, because this first one doesn't. It has shared kitchens and bathrooms and stuff like that. And if you want separate apartments, or if you want to do it on a bigger scale with 20–30 flats in a building, then of course it's much more expensive, and then you need some kind of institutional finance, and so it becomes harder to make rental prices affordable. And there's also this trade-off between how much money the members can bring in and how affordable the rent is going to be, because if you have members that can bring in a lot of own capital that they give for cheaper than a bank loan, or cheaper than external loans, then the rental prices will be lower. But then there's this trade-off, because actually you want to include people who can't put capital in the beginning, and so you need more external capital, and then that makes it more expensive. So it's kind of this balancing, I think, between this. Yeah, and I think this is a critique or a challenge of these kind of projects all over the world. But I also really think that, well, on the one hand, politically and also economically, to make it function, you really have to keep it affordable on the level of rents, because otherwise you won't have enough people who want to participate, because it's a lot more effort than if you just go and rent a flat somewhere else. I mean, you have to put working hours in it, in your own contribution. And I think to find enough people, and then you really have to keep rent levels low.
For instance, from the perspective of Belgrade, we don't know yet if we can make this form of housing affordable. It has to do with the fact that we don't have examples of it around, at which we can look and which we can actually understand, like how they perform. And the other thing is that we are trying here in the local context, we are trying something new. In reality, till we build maybe 1, 2, 3 of such examples here, we will not know actually. Another challenge which we have is if we, can we make actually housing which is both affordable and also future-proof? And when I speak about future-proof, I mainly speak also about like energy efficient, low-impact housing, the type of housing which you would like to leave as a sort of a legacy for the next, I don't know how long it's going to stand, 50, 100 years, And that's another challenge. Like we see a lot of examples of co-housing and great projects, cooperative housing from societies which have, where the population has a larger investment capacity. There, these projects are maybe easier to pull off. In our region, generally, that investment capacity is smaller. So whether we can also make really future-proof housing with this is something which we will still have to see. We did some here locally. We did some initial feasibility study on that, and it looks like it's a thin line to make housing which is, let's say, low impact, energy efficient, and also affordable. So you might, in the end, have to make a number of choices there of like what you want to do and what actually means also affordability.
Maybe I was thinking, meanwhile, what would be the answer to your question of public support, because MOBA is an international organization, and the public support in our case would mean support on EU level, because it's not like dependent on the local circumstances. And there we come to really an important question is what affordable housing and this kind of cooperative housing means in the larger EU agenda. And we have, one of the things that we have bit by bit started to talk about is a possible potential collaboration also with other similar cooperative structures or other kind of housing structures. So for instance, one of the things that is happening meanwhile is that we are talking with community land trust movement, let's say, from Northwestern Europe, because they are coming to a very similar situation in which they are looking for finance for the projects, community land trusts, and not necessarily community land trust, but let's say cooperative community land trust, community-led housing in general. And they're coming to the same issues, that individual projects are too small to approach these EU funds and finance. And there is a need to build some kind of pan-European, at least, advocacy towards changing the context of finance for these sort of projects. And this is the next level to which we are, let's say, trying to move together. Well, they're looking at MOBA as an example. We are, let's say, in these terms, more advanced than this group of community land trust organizations. I mean, they're more advanced in many other ways. Mm-hmm. in a way that they, for instance, manage to get a large EU project that supports their development, that they have a legal framework which is more developed and things like this. But on these kind of regional connections and building up a larger structure and the fund, we have set the first steps, and they're looking at that as an example. It's obvious that both for their context and our context, we are too small. And we realized that we probably have to gather to let's say, to make influence with our way of thinking and this approach to decision makers on the European level. So in that respect, we will try to act from that position together.
Mm-hmm.
From our perspective, we start to understand that cost of land, especially in cities, can be like basically a barrier for developing these projects. So that something like a land fund or a land bank might be also an important aspect of our future development. So you see that these things are somehow moving in parallel. Also, for instance, we've been just speaking with groups from Spain, from Barcelona. They're also looking at, in Barcelona, looking at setting up a community land trust to be able to easier facilitate groups to set up such projects. So I think this is somehow moving in parallel, but there might be also local issues. For instance, at the moment, it looks like here in Belgrade or in Serbia, it's difficult to implement such a form because it's difficult to separate ownership of land from that what is built on top of the land. So there might be legal hurdles to deal with.
But maybe just to add, if we speak again about MOBA level, I think one of the exciting and interesting things could be that the MOBA becomes a land trust, so that the MOBA could own land under the buildings which are cooperatively owned in the local context. And this is one of the things that we have been speaking about. I think this is still far from our capacity, but it is for sure something which is interesting, because in that way there would be like MOBA would have its role beyond just collecting finance, but would also be part of this non-speculative, let's say, mechanism that would be created then on the regional level. Well, in this way, it could be extension of the MOBA fund. So MOBA fund, instead of just lending, let's say, money to its members, it could be lending land to its members. So in that respect, there could be different sort of investors into this fund. I mean, we didn't really expand this into detail, but it is just a concept that we have started to think about, which could contribute so that let's say the cooperatives are renting from MOBA the land on which the buildings are leasing, let's say, so which would release them from the need to buy the land, which is a very big expense at the very beginning, but you would be paying incrementally this smaller amounts, much smaller amounts of money yearly. And in that respect, then that would release quite a lot the need for finance, initial need for finance for the groups that want to build a cooperative project. So it could be that in some context there is a public authority, but in some others not, that contribute to such a fund. At the moment, I mean, all of our projects started idealistically with this idea, let's get lease land from public authorities, but we really notice in all of our contexts big obstacles of first public support, and the other thing, even if they're supportive, there is not so much land that they have. So the question is then, what is this going to stop us, or we should invent other mechanisms that would make this possible? And then this other mechanism is a land fund or a land bank that MOBA could be the holder of.
Right at this moment, what you get is direct access to all other members through means of exchange of knowledge. I think that's already an important part. And secondly, you get automatically a right to attend regular MOBA events. You know, we like on half-year basis, something like that. We organize MOBA meetings, but these are not just meetings; these are also workshops. So this is another nice benefit. And thirdly, just this year we have are now piloting for the first time the MOBA grant, which is a non-refundable grant with support of World Habitat. So all MOBA, full MOBA members are able to apply for this grant for small-scale projects, and this, I think, it's another very, very big benefit. And this is right now. And keep in mind, please, it's less than a year that we actually formalized and started. So hopefully we will be able to expand this.
Maybe just to make it clear, because this is a grant and then there is a fund. So there are these two separate things. Grants are non-refundable and fund is refundable. So basically you get a loan from a MOBA and then you have to pay it back. So there are these two different things and they are meant for different purposes also.
Well, the first investor or who supported us was this Swiss cooperative that we mentioned already. And I think the idea is kind of that in the first phase, it would be interesting to target these Western European older and bigger cooperatives, because there is this principle of cooperativism that is like international solidarity and peer solidarity, and to kind of call on that to have them invest in the fund, because previously when we were talking with I don't know, German cooperatives, for example, they are like very interested in what we're doing, but they don't want to get into all of these local contexts, and so we think that now that we have this transnational entity, it's probably easier to approach them, for them to invest or even donate money that can go into the fund. So I think that's one direction, and another direction that we would need to explore is these larger volumes of impact investment, for example, or some kind of and other forms of patient capital that are these larger actors that are willing to invest, and then they get some kind of small return on it. But then it's, yeah, I don't know, that's something that needs to be developed in the next period, but the more grant money comes into the fund in the beginning, the better it is, because if we have to pay an interest towards the investors and also take an interest on the loan for the MOBA functioning, then in the end it can make it quite expensive. So in the development phase, it's probably good to look for grants.
Sorry, I just wanted to add something about these channels of finance. One of the channels that we started to open up is with ethical and cooperative banks. And last year we have made an application in which we involved to get EU funds to actually develop the fund itself. And we started through that talks with FEBEA, which is a Federation of Ethical and Cooperative Banks. Alternative banks. On European level. So they are interested in working with us on this also further on.
So what specifically I was mentioning now is refundable money from European Union, like from the central bank or from EBRD. So what they do is they look for institutions like MOBA will be soon that are able to identify good projects. Important part of this is also social impact and like ESG-based investment, if you're familiar with the term. So environments, social impact, and governance. And then you loan to these projects to make them happen, right? And you collect interest rate, and of course, when you're giving this money back to the European institution, you also have to pay interest rate on it, but there is a slight difference between it. This interest rate is very small. So the idea is that MOBA would absorb this money, and based on the existing need of the project and based on the current status of development of each individual project, it would be able to give out loans. For for non-refundable grants, it's a little bit different, but this is meant more for early stage projects. Yeah, because for early stage projects, it doesn't make much sense to get a loan, because even with a small loan, there is not much you can promise that this will really help you, because there are many very concrete and external obstacles on which you may not have impact on yet, or are not able to have an effect on. But yeah, we're also looking at applying with MOBA on non-refundable grants on European level, and this then depends on the type of grant we are looking at. We might apply only as MOBA and with some other partners, but we might also apply as MOBA and some of the cooperative, national cooperative projects, if the specifics of the grant allow for that. Of course, if it is possible, this is our preferred way of doing.
This point, we are still, let's say, a number of pioneers, very activistic in that sense. And when we look at the long term, it's the question whether you can continue like that. It's a bit of a chicken-egg question. So if you want to have a larger impact, we cannot be just simply a small group of activistic, initiatives. And that means that the character of MOBA in that sense will have to change to some degree. Now, at the moment, we are doing this more or less volunteer, or with the limited resources which we have. But when we come to the point that MOBA becomes an intermediary on this sort of level, this sort of scale, it has to some degree, it has to professionalize, it has to bring in capacities to deal with this, capacities to build up this sort of portfolio of projects. And you lose something with that, and you win, of course, something. What we will lose is this sort of informal, almost hacktivistic approach, which we can allow now, which is really nice for pioneering projects. But what we will win is that you would get a much larger capacity to make such projects possible. We've been looking at ideas that, let's say, in a period of 10 years, we could grow maybe to 80 full members. That is very far away from where we are now. But if we would indeed manage to do that and open up possibilities for such a number of groups, that would be really fantastic.
But so far the work is done with a small group of people which are driven by some enthusiasm. I would say that's our main driver at this point.
Yes, but I do think that this it has led to inequalities in work management, and this issue that it's mostly done unpaid and also driven by enthusiasm, and so I really think, well, Mark said sometime in the future, but I think we, in a way, we are already at that point where this is becoming difficult, and then actually for the tasks that were paid, because there were some aspects of the work that we could pay for from these different grants, and there we usually had this kind of common discussion that some people take on certain roles, and for that they get a certain amount of money. But that was the minority of the work that has been done. Yes. Yes, and I think since we established the European Cooperative Society, and there's this management board, and people who took on a role in the management board, the 3 people, they also, well, it was also a decision to practically take on some responsibilities, I think, but maybe Anna and Rok.
For a while, the management board held very regular meetings, but now for some months, not meetings at all. But otherwise, this is very much project-based work. So the groups are formed based of existing projects that we are trying to work on or develop. So for instance, if you're working on development of a grant application, a couple of people would tag on, who are able to dedicate time, and that's it. But yeah, this creates a lot of discrepancies within groups and between groups.
Another challenge is that to make this sort of breakthrough, likely we will have to get to, especially when we speak to finance, we have to get to larger sort of like portfolio volumes. And it's even the question whether the current groups, if you put them together, these pilot projects, if that would be, let's say, if that's interesting enough for larger finance partners to let's say to even wake up for, you know, like this is a bit of a challenge which we are facing. Another very practical challenge, I think, is how to keep the sort of like spirit for this sort of work going. It has, of course, has to do with you know, like with the you know, the personal you know, the amount of people which we have and all of that. But we understood that we get a lot of our enthusiasm about actually meeting each other, getting together, throwing a weekend workshop or something like that, doing really intense work and just and getting out of there again. We've suffered from the current pandemic in that sense, but I think on the longer term, this sort of you know, this way of working is probably somehow incompatible with the sort of ambition which MOBA has, you know, like becoming this much larger or this structure which deals on this much larger level. So I don't know how long we can mobilize this sort of energy which has brought us till here.
Maybe I will start not with the city, but maybe I will start with the first grant that we got to develop came from FundAction, which is activist fund. It's a fund of 250, 300, I don't know by now how many people, activists from various contexts of Europe actually decided to give us grant actually 2 times to develop MOBA. So I think initial was a smaller one, was more for the first exchanges and workshops that we organized, and then the second one was the largest grant that this fund has, which is not so large in the end, 20,000 euro, but we got the support to develop to register actually MOBA as European Cooperative Society on EU level. So I mean, for me, this is what was an interesting measure, let's say, in how this idea resonates in this context. So basically, this is a group of people, and I know here from Serbia, quite some people are part of it, who voted for us to go on with this. So let's say this is the most measurable. Maybe some other people can tell in their own contexts how the things that they're doing sound, or what MOBA means for them.
Well, I think there is this problem that you're saying, Dimitris, that it's this kind of work on cooperative housing it easily becomes this very professionalized thing, well, yeah, the housing movement scene in Budapest is not so very strong or developed, but like we have, like, some of us in this cooperative group also have these other involvements or engagements in some other organizations, and so we have, I think, personal level contacts with these housing movement groups, but they're not like I wouldn't say they are very closely linked to this whole housing cooperative project. So I think that's a relevant point that you're making, and even like the difficulties that we encounter locally. I think we have this tension even within within this whole cooperative housing idea, because I think that's one aspect where we really have to develop locally and also on the level of MOBA to kind of find a more or not lose, let's say, not lose the political register of talking about this, and also the to a broader public and also to the people that we want to involve in this. Because if you just keep talking to them about these very technical aspects, that's not going to be very attractive for most people. So yeah.
I cannot speak directly in terms of MOBA and how it relates this to local activism, because there is no direct link between these two aspects. But like we have a link between MOBA and Zadrugator, which is the local cooperative in Slovenia, and then the link between Zadrugator and local activist groups. And I think these two aspects are very much complementary. Like for Zadrugator, it's extremely important to work on advocacy, because if we don't initiate some necessary legal changes, we will never have a good housing cooperative model operational here. And we will never have accessible housing. So this kind of work is for us extremely important, but this sometimes prevents us to do certain or takes away time that we could dedicate for other more grassroots work, let's say. But there are informal networks and groups that are dealing with that, and I think that's also as important as this work. I think they help each other in a way. Right? So I don't know if the government, I can speak from practical examples, when the government is trying to change the law, we can, as a Zadrugator, provide expert analysis on that. We can provide recommendations, while the let's say the activist group can organize a protest, organize workshops, etc. And this works very well together, I think. And we help each other out, always.
Here in Belgrade, we have been with this idea of cooperatives. We started within an organization, which is association, which is called Who Builds the City, or Grad. And we have been since very early on aware that we cannot leave the idea of cooperative housing as an island, and that we have to connect with various different groups that are interested in aspects of housing. And this we started to do already in 2015, and we were then reacting also on the new law on housing and things like that were coming up. We have been also co-initiators of a movement against evictions as individuals, but also in the beginning as an organization. So then the movement decided that it will be a movement of individuals. So the, let's say, initiating groups withdrew from this, but of course we as individuals stayed present in it. And maybe what is the most interesting recently is that there have been a number of organizations, 5 for the start, that have decided to work together under the umbrella of a movement for housing equality. And we have literally, yes, they launched the website, which it's also in English, so I can send you the link to this. And what is important for us is that we are, let's say, pushing collectively. So these 5 organizations, from the movement against evictions and us, who are developing cooperative housing, and a group which is working with minorities which have issue with even energy poverty and things like this, and cannot cover the basic costs, to a group which are more like policy thinking on a policy level, to work together towards pushing collectively a certain agenda towards housing. And I think that this is really important, that we cannot leave this work on developing alternatives as an island which is detached from the rest. And I mean, hopefully, my hope at least is, and this is also what I would like, that this movement also starts to think is the cross section of potentials that these groups can bring together, even in terms of collectively developing these alternatives. And yeah, it's too early to talk about all of that, but it's what I'm really looking forward to.
It is interesting to see if we can make a sort of a structure which can keep some of the energy which we have now. Now, I don't know how to do that, but I think that would be like super valuable, because for me, these MOBA meetings have been among the best meetings I ever attended. So, you know, like great energy, like a crazy group of people. How can we keep that into the future? That's, I think if we manage that, that would be really fantastic.
It's not so important, but I wanted to add, even when we become more formalized, don't forget that we will have a constant influx of young startup projects such as ourselves right now. So we'll have this constant influx of this energy. So maybe this will help.